We're going to be talking about wrinkles right now, which can be extremely intimidating and confusing at times. And why don't we just try to make it as simple and as basic as possible? So when I was painting this woman, I painted her in black and white and gray. So it's very similar. My underpainting looked very similar to this image. So when I was painting the underpainting and thinking about the wrinkles, I actually went pretty hard at first when I was doing my first pass of my underpainting. So I made the lines. I made them pretty harsh and I made them pretty dark because I knew that once I got the initial lines in, I got the darkest areas in, I would be adding a layer of glaze on top of that later, and not just one layer of glaze. I'd be adding a lot more. So if I added one layer of glaze on top of this, it would be softening those lines a little bit. If I added, let's see here, like a few more layers of glaze, it would soften those wrinkles. Whoa, I went a little bit too hard. But as you can see, the more, let's pretend that this transparency is a layer of glaze. Every time I add a layer of glaze on, it softens any kind of hard detail that you did before. So the more layers of glaze I add on, the more smooth and the more blurred out it's going to be. So would I be adding layers of glaze over the entire face? No. I mean, yes, but not to smooth out the wrinkles. So what I would do is this. So let me show you an example as if we were, I'm going to draw it, but we're just going to pretend as if we were painting. So if I were drawing a wrinkle, let's say that this Sharpie line is a wrinkle. Wrinkles. Do another one then. All right, let's say that those are wrinkles, okay? If I were going to paint this, I would paint it in at first, just keeping it very dark like I did here with my Sharpie line. But this really is, a wrinkle is a fold of the skin. So any kind of folding of the skin is like this, right? So pretend that this is one layer of skin folding together to create a shadow in the middle. So something to keep in mind is that there is that shadow that we had here, but then there's also going to be a highlight and there's going to be a midtone and a shadow on the other side of the wrinkle. So let's see what that would look like. Very similar to hair. When we are painting our wrinkles, we're going to kind of keep it dark in here, but soften that maybe with another layer of glaze and a darker valued color on our scale. So, but we're going to soften it by just kind of blurring it a little bit. As you get towards the center of the wrinkle, very similar to when we were doing our hair exercise, it's going to stay light. All depending on, I guess, where this would be as if the light was shining straight down, right? Down here, though, let's pretend that the light is more this direction. So the highlight would probably be here, and it would get more shadowed over here. So let's see what that would look like. So it'd stay pretty shadowed on this area. And then as we get to that side, the highlight would get a lot lighter. So everything really does depend, even each individual wrinkle. And the more you do your portraits, like the first three portraits are going to be your most challenging portraits because you're thinking about every aspect of everything. But when you are just beginning anything, just lay in everything in as like sort of like you're a kindergartner. Just make it super liney, super black. And then later, when you're starting to add your layers of glaze, you're going to start to be more intentional about how the wrinkle looks. And you're going to be able to soften it and blur it and blend it to make it a little bit, more natural looking. But even if you just painted it kind of sloppy or chunky in the beginning, you can blend everything with your glazing fluid, because the more glaze that you add on top to that area, it really will soften it. And do I need to do the glaze for the entire thing? No, maybe I just add a few layers of glaze onto one side of the wrinkle that needs to be a little bit more blurry or softened, right? You have all different sizes and shapes of paintbrushes. So you can really get in with maybe a smaller paintbrush or a thicker one. Like sometimes I'll use a flat brush if my wrinkles are looking a little bit too like high contrasty, like too dark or too like liney. I can take some glaze and really just apply it over the line like this. And trying to apply it like this, then it kind of blurs out everything on either side because that line would be right in the middle. Let's see if I can show you. That line's in the middle. If I apply a layer of glaze, not only is it softening that line, but it's softening the lines around it. And in turn, it's blending it together a little bit more, sort of like if I soften this with my blending stump while drawing. And you kind of blend it out. The whole point is we do have lines, right? Wrinkles are lines and they can look kind of hard and crisp in certain areas. But then the rest of the time, it really is within a certain range of value. Like these two values on this wrinkle it's very similar. It's dark, but that side is dark too. It's not that much different. When you go up a little bit higher and the skin is curving up and over, that's where the light is getting, there's more light in that part of the wrinkle, and then it's really dark underneath. So in that case, let's do this again. We're going to kind of mimic her wrinkle right here. Let's see here. We're going to do this line. We'll say that her nose is kind of like that. The wrinkle, and I'm just doing like, check this out, like a Sharpie marker line. See how dark that is. So this way you're not like too worried about how dark you go at first. It's okay. And there's a few more like smaller lines kind of coming out here. And then there's even smaller lines. Like when you're beginning, you don't need to think about these tiny, tiny little wrinkles down here. But the more advanced you get, the more realistic you get, you're going to be thinking about those tiny little wrinkles. And you're going to be thinking about the highlights, midtones, and shadows of that very, very small area. Which is why it is kind of important that as you advance as an artist, to get something that you can help zoom in. So me, I use my computer. And I have a laptop that I can zoom in and get very close on high resolution photos and see those tiny details as if that is the picture that I'm focusing on, and a very small paintbrush to think about what the highlights, midtones, and shadows would be in that very specific area. Other artists use iPads and they just make sure they put the settings on so it's not gonna like go dark every 30 seconds. You just go into your settings and make sure you set your screen display to be on for an hour of painting. It might even be a good way for you to measure how much time you're working so you don't burn out. But anyhow, let's go back to this. I got a little distracted. So if I wanted to think about what this looks like, this area of her face right here is in shadow. And I could tell because it's darker than that area. So the lighting in her home or wherever she may be in the studio is highest here. You can tell that it's very, very light here. And then it's slowly getting darker until it gets here. So you can tell that her skin is turning away from that light. So that is actually going into that fold of the skin. So instead of thinking of it as her face, just think of it as like a piece of paper, right? That is being folded away and around. And then the way the light is shifting or like affecting that fold of paper, you're going to get different shadows. That was not a very good example, but okay, so why don't we do this? I can tell right here that there is an area that's very dark. It's almost like a circle or an oval. So that would be kind of like this area here for me. And instead of using a very crisp line, I'm going to use this. And kind of like when we're painting, we just kind of want to block everything in, like our darkest areas, our lightest areas. All right, next what I'm going to do is sort of think about underneath is very dark here. So we can kind of go dark on this side. Underneath the nose here, it's pretty dark, so I can kind of make it dark under there. And then it kind of blends its way out that direction. So if I was painting this, I would probably paint it where I'd move from the darkest value of my painting palette and work my way up. So I'd start with my darkest value of my painting palette for that line, and then work my way up for right underneath it. Then I work my way up, moving my way out and down. So it's really just like steps. You're just working from darkest to lightest. And there really is not the lightest in this area, except for maybe right here. And once I get the basic blocking in of all of this, that's when I can start to get a little bit more detailed on the wrinkle itself. And that's not until I figured out the value of this whole area, this whole chunk. Okay, so now what I can do is start getting a little bit more refined with my values. This is when I would go in. My initial, let's say this is my initial underpainting. Now I'm going to go back in and refine it with Glaze and my value scale again on my palette. So what do I mean by value scale? We have our white paint here, or a very, very light value paint here. And then we have our black or our darkest valued paint here. And then remember, we mixed all of our paints together, and it starts like dark, and then it gets progressively lighter as you go up the scale. Think of these as your steps. Make it really easy on yourself. The darkest would be where the darkest line is, where that shadow is. Move my way up and do the shadow underneath. And then move your way up, and we're going to be thinking about different areas that are still wrinkly, but not too dark as that one. Add those in. And then every layer of glaze that you add on top of it is going to soften it. Like I said, pretend that's a layer of glaze. It's going to soften it. And do you need to glaze the entire area like with one big paintbrush? No, I'd probably be using a small paintbrush, just glazing out certain areas that need to be softened or blurred or smoothed or kept hard. So you're always thinking about those things. Is it dark or is it light or is it mid-tone? Is it hard? Is it blurry? Is it crisp? Is it like textured, or is it bumpy? Like, these are all the things that you're going to be thinking about as you progress. In the beginning, you start very broad and then you get very focused as you progress. So I'm going to keep on continuing very broad. I'm just going to be focusing on the darkest area here. Keep that area dark. And then I'm going to start thinking about pulling it out. Now, you see how I'm kind of pulling this blending stump out? This is exactly how I paint as well. And that's why I think that once you learn how to paint, it does translate well into drawing. It does translate well into any other thing that you're doing. Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay. So it's a back and forth. I'm going to add in another dark line here because there is a shadow here. And there is a shadow here. So I'm refining. And wherever there's a shadow, there's probably a highlight right next to it. So that's something to keep in mind. We have the fold of this wrinkle, and then we're going to have some highlights as well. I'm going to use my eraser to kind of start pulling out some of those wrinkle areas that are next to it. And I'm starting to get a little bit more detailed. Let's go back up to the other side, the opposite side, where we're seeing some of that curling up. So it is dark here. We can make this area right around the wrinkle a little bit darker. But then I'm using contour lines, and I do this with my paintbrush as well to kind of start curving where I'm seeing the curve of her cheek. Kind of like the comb effect that we're doing with our hair exercise in the mountains. Now, I'm using this Q-tip for drawing, but it's similar to when we're blurring out or blending out with our blending brushes or mop brushes to make it extra soft and smooth. So if you notice in here, this area of her nose, it gets really dark here, but then it's very light on the bottom part of the nose. So we can play with that as well. We're going to get dark here and it kind of blurs itself out, but then we're going to keep it kind of light on the opposite side of the nose. So you're kind of just, when you're painting, you're really just focusing on each section at a time and then working your way around and creating highlights, midtones, and shadows everywhere that you are working around. Working from the darkest, working your way up the steps. And then as you progress, you add layers of glaze to blend it or make it softer or smoother. And use different sizes of paintbrushes to do that.